Hello guys, welcome to a very simple mixing tutorial for the 1 minute Kublai Khan destroyer of a song that is Antpile. This is one of my favorite songs of all time. You guys need to go check out the original with lyrics. You will be surprised. So yeah, not much to talk about, so let's discuss every plugin in detail. Let's start with my mix bus. So the first thing on my mix bus is Golfos. This guy, as you by now should know, is a dynamic EQ, I would call it that tries to model a curve of the human hearing in the sense of what sounds pleasant to it. So now you can see it's reacting to my noise floor. There's probably some noise from these analog modeling plugins. And what it does to the noise is pretty helpful in explaining what it does to a mix. So it sees the noise. It's trying to tame its mid-range, which is the tame control. If there's any resonances, it's going to take them down strategically, and the recover is going to recover what sounds good. So Golfos, and correctly so, thinks my noise needs a lot more low end at 200 hertz. So it's a boost there, and thinks it would sound more pleasant to the ear if there was a very shiny 12K boost as well. Now let's see what it thinks of my mix. The most important thing is that it thinks, it usually always does this, adds a bunch of 15K, 14K, that makes the cymbals poke through in the correct way, and it also makes the shell attack and the guitar attack very, very cool. There's some decongestioning happening in the mid-range. That's always pleasant. I always like what it does, and it balances the subs. So when the kick is hitting, it ducks the subs so that it's balanced. When the bass is playing without a kick hit, the subs go up. So this just makes the mix sound 5% better. This is a 5% better guy as well. Joannesek bus glue mix, not using for the mix compression, which is at 0, but for the coloring options. So no small time is literally a sound better button with a very funny name. Let's listen for the guitar stereo widening and for the bass enhancement. Guitars and cymbals win a lot with this. A lot. 3%. But it's a good 3%. And the transformers, they emulate different transformers on a Shadow Hills mastering compressor, where the steel is very saturated and deep at 50 hertz. The iron is a little bit cleaner and full at around 100 hertz. And nickel is just very clean, and there's an extra top end boost, just like what Golfos is doing. So when I'm using Golfos, I usually don't go for nickel. Today I went for iron, but let's try all the 3 different ones. Need to pay very close attention, but the steel and nickel difference is the biggest. Go back and listen to cymbals, to the smearing of the low end. Steel is a little bit bigger, but it's more smeared on the low end. Interesting stuff. As for the compression, I am leaving it to a SSL bus compressor because I can better control the attack and release. I'm going for a 3 millisecond attack so that the kick and snare get chopped off the way I intended them to in this mix. Different, if I put a slower attack, kick and snare will be very pokey through the center, and as the attack gets faster, it chops them off faster. So 3 milliseconds is where I like it. Let's compare. So hopefully you agree with me that 3 is the good middle point between the very squashy 0.1 and the very open 30. That's what I'm listening for. The fastest release, I usually like it on metal music to make sure the compressor recovers fast from snare and kick hits. The tape plugin is here to try to bring some further extra fatness to the mix. This is super subtle, but it does something in smoothing the highs and also boosting the lows in terms of the attack, namely of the kick drum and the sustain of the bass. Let's try to listen for it. Terribly subtle. Like right now I'm hearing it on guitars, I think, on the mid-range, some distortion. I'm still learning what this guy does, but I always like it, but it's so subtle. I need to study my shit. Again, multi-band compressor, my usual guy. If Golfos is a dynamic EQ with infinite little bands, this guy has 5 only, so that I can better focus on different regions of the mix. I'll just usually leave it flat though and let it take down what it thinks should be taken down. Usually it's mostly the guitars, so I will adjust the range of that mid-range band as much as I want the guitars to cut through, if that makes sense. Check it out. It's a different level of frequency balance, makes the mix sound a little bit more scooped, gives it that modern aggressive sound, but it should be subtle. Check what happens if you overdo it. I'll be honest with you, it actually sounds pretty cool and is a good demonstration of what it does, but it's very, very pumpy. But the EQ effect that it adds is really nice. My limiter, since this mix is already so squashed, I don't think I'm doing a lot with the limiter, but let's see before I talk. Okay, we're actually hitting a decent bit, so up to 6 decibels are being chopped off on the loudest snares, and it's hitting the kick, snare, and a little bit of the sustain too. Like I've explained before, the way I use the limiter is I take down the threshold until I'm hitting the kick and snare, and then I go further down, digging into the guitar level and bass level until it doesn't sound good anymore. This would be very conservative limiting, where only kicks and snares are getting chopped off, and then you can go further. Somewhere about there. Sounds good to me. And that is my mix bus chain in actually pretty good detail today, since we have so little to talk about after. So it's good that I did a short song that doesn't have many tracks. The drum sound is my Periphery 4 drum sound. So if you go to the Periphery 4 demo and review video, there's a good 20 minutes of talking about how I mix this kit, but there's two different kit pieces. So I switched the kick from the 22 to the 24. I wanted that deeper, clickier kick drum. The 22 is a little bit more full range with more mids. And I switched from the mid-range cast snare to the low tune Pearl Sensitone. That hits like a fucking truck. And just those changes change the character of the kit completely. If you hear them with the kit pieces that were before, they're two very different sounds. This one is very cool for this big ass hardcore mix. And there's two more plugins on the drum bus to make it sound more aggressive. And those are, oh no, there's this one more, but there's a change in one of them. So the clipper, I boosted the signal going into the clipper. It was at about 0.5 decibels and I put it at 3. What this does is that it will drive the snare further into distortion while bringing the kick and the cymbals and toms and all the low level stuff up to match the snare. You can see how big the snare cut is. So then why not bring the rest of the kit pieces together with that if you want that aggressive sound? And then again, I try the tape guy, but here it's the amount is 5. So there's more saturation going on. This is once again to try to make the low level stuff come up, like these tom ring outs. I'm hoping this saturation will help them sustain a little bit more. So I also took down the tape speed because the tape speed affects the low end response of the plugin. Faster tape speeds, more modern tape speeds, had more difficulty catching the low end information, if that is the correct way to explain it. And the slower tape speed you go, the noisier and more distorted it gets, but also the more low end it gets. So that's what I was looking for. Other than that, you can check out the P4 demo and review for the full drum sound mix. We got programmed bass on this one for extreme consistency. Trying a new plugin. So I got this on Black Friday too. It's the Nuclear Bass by Impact Studios. Yeah, this guy is very, very simple. It's just a Dingwall Nolly bass, fully sampled. I don't know what else to tell you. It was dirt cheap, the DI edition. So I thought I would have one more just to get... Eurobass is very good, but it only goes down to E. This one goes all the way down to C. C. That's fucking ridiculous though. I have used it already though in some cool stuff. What am I doing to it? Putting it through my favorite plugin on earth, STL Tonality Will Putney, and this is the album bass preset called Bloodlust. Already great distortion. I just need to balance the low end and top end together, and that's what you do with Joel Wanasek Bus Glue Bass. It also adds a nice EQ curve. You can see the different levels I chose for low end and top end, so I get to rebalance the bass sound. Then I add extra bass with our bass. I am generating harmonics at about 70 hertz, excuse me. This is just to get that really fluffy, really deep low end. And this SSL EQ is here to shape mostly the high end of the bass, but there's also some low end stuff. So I'm really cranking the 1.5 to 1000 hertz area for that pick attack, boosting a 5K as well, cutting a little bit of 800, that's useless information, very honky, and further boosting the low sub 50 to 60 hertz area. There's also filters for excessive high end above 10K and excessive low end down from 20 hertz. Then a limiter for volume consistency, and we're good. You can hopefully hear how this guy and the mid-range boosts are what make the bass cut through the guitars in terms of attack, which is awesome. Now, for the guitars, this was a fun experiment because I got to drop the mayonnaise all the way down to A flat on 52 gauge strings, which was pretty stupid. They sound a little bit out of tune, but I did it for the memes. Look how good the DI sounds. Super good. What I did then is I clipped them so that they could be louder and more distorted going into the amplifier. So this is basically cheating because I'm using the album preset from the KUBLAI Khan album that has this song. So if you want to have a laugh with me. There's some key differences based on the guitar alone and pickups and my master bus EQ, but it's pretty much the fucking same tone. I might have cut down the gain a little bit for my taste, and that's it. Further processing, it should be filters. So that's a filter at 80 hertz, and that's a filter at 11K hertz. And this is a palm mute compressor. So I chose a very low end 110 frequency that sounds like this. Can you solo it? This is a frequency that's very much activated on palm mutes. And this EQ, every band can have its little compressor. So you set a threshold and you set a range for it to go down. And if it goes over the threshold on that frequency range alone, you can cut it. So you can see it cut on palm mutes. It's very good. This harshness control plugin, BX Refinement, very, very useful to get rid of annoying resonances. Hopefully you heard this harsh shit go away. Into a guitar compressor. The only purpose is to make the guitars flat lined in terms of very, very brick walled dynamics. I want the guitars to be a nice, lovely brick of sound. And it also helps that when the palm mutes hit, it compresses them a little more so that they are not louder than the sustained chords. And then a little EQ to shape the sound closer to the original. There was a little bit of woofiness at 300. and there was plenty of attack at 1.4 that could be eased and taken out. Then I have a little bass drop that came with a cymbal. I wasn't interested in the cymbal, so I EQ'd the cymbal out with a low pass at 500 Hertz. And then I used Reaper's built-in saturation to give the bass drop some upper harmonics for it to cut through everything. Of course, it gives it about extra 4 decibels of gain, but also upper harmonics. I always have some trouble with getting bass drops to cut through, but this usually helps. So there you go, guys. That's my mix of Antpile by KUBLAI Han. I hope you have learned something in this very simple mixing tutorial, but we did go into great detail about my mix bus, which is good. Then I can redirect people to this one for individual explanations of the plugins. And yeah, that's going to be it from me, guys. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you next time.